He trained the man who conquered the world, but died in exile. His work was lost for centuries, yet it built the foundation of our reality. This is the story of the mind that changed everything. To hear more powerful stories just like this and improve your English, make sure you subscribe and press the bell so you never miss our next video. Today, we are going to tell you the story of a man who did not fight battles, but he trained the man who conquered the known world. A man who never wore a crown, but he shaped the minds of kings, emperors, scientists, and thinkers for the next 2,000 years. A man who did not invent machines, but he invented how we think, about thinking. This is the life-changing, emotional, and inspiring story of Aristotle, the philosopher who taught Alexander the Great, the mind that built the very foundation of logic, science, politics, ethics, biology, education, and leadership. If you are someone who sometimes feels like the world does not understand your ideas, if you want to learn English by listening to real, powerful stories, if you dream of changing the world, not with weapons, but with words and wisdom, then this story is for you. This is not just a biography. This is a journey through pain and passion and power and purpose. We will travel from a curious little boy in northern Greece to the man whose brain became the blueprint, the guide for modern civilization. And yes, this video is also wonderful for your English. You will improve your listening skills. You will learn new vocabulary. You will understand history better. And most importantly, you will learn how one person, with nothing but questions in his mind, changed the world forever. So please, sit back, relax, focus, and listen with your heart. Because now begins the story of the man who taught the world how to think. Part 1. The Curious Boy from Greece. How it all began. Let me take you back in time. Not 100 years, not 500 years, but over 2,400 years ago. In a small, ancient town called Stagira in northern Greece, a baby was born. The year was 384 BC. His name was Aristotle. His father's name was Nicomachus. He was a doctor. But he was not just any doctor. He was the personal physician, the private doctor, to the king of Macedonia. This means that Aristotle grew up around very important people, people of power, people of medicine, and people of deep knowledge. He watched his father work. He saw how his father used observation, how he looked closely at people, how he used logic to understand the human body and heal it. This made a very deep impression on young Aristotle. He did not play with toys like most children. He played with questions. He did not care so much about games. He cared about how things worked. Even as a small child, he would just stare. At animals, at leaves, at the clouds, wondering. Why does a bird fly? Why does the sun rise? What makes us happy? What is truth? These were not normal thoughts for a child. But Aristotle was not born to be normal. He was born to observe the world, deeply, and he would spend his entire life doing just that. But then, everything changed. He was still just a boy. Tragedy struck his life very early. When Aristotle was still a young child, both his mother and his father died. We do not know the exact reason, but we do know this. He became an orphan. He was alone before he could even really understand what death meant. That pain, the pain of being left alone so early, it never really left him. But instead of becoming bitter or angry, he became obsessed with life. He did not ask, Why me? He asked, what is life? What is death? Why are we here? His relatives took care of him for a time, and eventually he was sent to Athens. Athens was the most famous city of learning in the entire ancient world, and that is where his real journey began. When he was just 17 years old, Aristotle walked into a place that would change his life forever. It was called Plato's Academy. This was the first real university in history, and at the center of this amazing school was a man who was already a legend. His name was Plato, the greatest philosopher of his time, and the student of the great Socrates. Imagine that. Imagine you are 17 years old. You are an orphan. You walk into a place filled with the smartest people in the world, and your teacher is a man who studied under Socrates himself, the man who chose to die rather than stop speaking the truth. For Aristotle, this place was heaven. For the next 20 years, Aristotle stayed at the academy. He was not just a student. He became the most brilliant, the brightest student Plato had ever seen. But even though Aristotle loved his teacher, Plato, he did not agree with everything. Plato believed in ideal forms. This was the idea that the real world, the world we touch and see, is just a shadow, and the perfect version of everything, the perfect tree, the perfect chair, the perfect human, exists in another invisible world. But Aristotle did not believe that. He believed in what we can touch, what we can see, what we can measure and test. Plato looked up at the sky and said, "There is a perfect version of a tree somewhere out there." But Aristotle, he looked at the ground. He looked at the tree right in front of him, and he said, "No, this tree, right here. Let's study it. Let's understand it." He started writing about everything: animals, politics, human behavior, the stars, happiness, the soul. He was not trying to win arguments. He was trying to understand everything that exists. He asked millions of questions, and he wrote thousands of pages, all by hand, with no internet, no electricity, no tools, except his amazing brain and a scroll. He was becoming more than just a student. He was becoming a new force of knowledge. But then, something unexpected happened. When Plato died, everyone, including Aristotle, probably thought that he would take over the academy. He was the best student, but he did not. Why? Because some people believed he was too different. His ideas were too scientific, too rebellious, too challenging to Plato's teachings. And so, even after 20 years of loyalty and dedication and brilliance, Aristotle was not chosen. It broke his heart. He had lost his second home. So once again, just like when he lost his parents, Aristotle had to walk away from something he loved. Before we continue with his journey, I want to pause and ask you something. Have you ever given your absolute best, your heart, to a job, or a school, or a person, and in the end, it was not enough? How did you find the strength to start over again? It's a very difficult, very human feeling. Please share your thoughts and your own stories in the comments below. But this time, he did not fall into darkness. He began a journey that would take him across the world, and eventually into the life of a boy who would become the most powerful man in history. The academy door had closed behind him. He had given it 20 years of his life. He had studied harder than anyone. He had questioned everything, and he had offered his deepest loyalty. But in the end, it was not enough. When Plato died, the school needed a new leader, and they did not choose Aristotle. Why? Because he did not fit in. He did not just follow Plato's ideas. He thought differently. He asked new questions. He wanted more than ideal worlds. He wanted to touch the real one. And for that, he was quietly pushed out. Now, at the age of 37, Aristotle stood at a crossroads and he was homeless. He had no job, no city, no position, but his mind. His mind was burning with a fire. Aristotle did not complain. He did not attack the academy. He did not try to get revenge. He simply turned toward the unknown. He believed, if the academy will not hear my voice, then the world will. He left Athens behind. He began to travel from city to city. He was not searching for comfort. He was searching for truth. He believed that every place, every animal, every plant, every person carried a lesson, and he would collect them all. Aristotle's first stop was a city called Assos, by the sea in Asia Minor. This is in modern-day Turkey. It was ruled by a man named Hermias. Hermias was a former student of Plato, and he was a wise, forward-thinking man. He welcomed philosophers like they were family. Hermias saw the brilliance in Aristotle. He offered him a home. He offered him resources. And most importantly, he offered him freedom. Freedom to teach and freedom to think. Aristotle began holding lessons under the open sky. He taught not just theory, but real-world thinking. He asked his students to look and touch and measure and wonder. It was here that something wonderful and unexpected happened. Aristotle, the great mind, fell in love. He met Pythias, Hermias's adopted daughter. She was intelligent, thoughtful, and full of questions, just like him. They got married. They had a daughter, and they named her Pythias too. Aristotle, the philosopher of reason, was now also a father and a husband, and it changed him. He began writing more about ethics, about family, and about the balance of love and logic. He started thinking, what is the good life? What makes a human life complete? His heart was full, and his mind was expanding. But happiness is rarely safe for long. While Aristotle was building his peaceful world in Assos, the real world was watching. The powerful Persian Empire saw Hermias as a threat. A Greek leader supporting Greek philosophers. They thought this was dangerous. They captured Hermias. They tortured him, and then they executed him. Aristotle was devastated. His friend, his mentor, the man who protected him, was gone. This was a turning point. Aristotle realized something very painful. He learned that even wisdom cannot protect you from the cruelty of power. He wrote a hymn for Hermias, not just in sadness, but in honor. He would carry Hermias's memory with him, wherever he went next. Aristotle moved again. This time to Mytilene, a city on the island of Lesbos. He was older now, wiser, a little quieter, and here, surrounded by the sea, something new awakened inside him. He became obsessed with life, not just human life, but all life. He studied fish, and birds, and insects, and mammals. He studied the way they moved, the way they mated, the way they gave birth, the way they died. He dissected animals. He watched their behavior. He drew what he saw. He took endless notes. This was the birth of biology. Not just ideas, but observation, comparison, classification. He discovered patterns. He learned that dolphins breathe air, that octopuses can change color, that chicks form inside eggs, that some fish lay thousands of eggs while others give live birth. No one in history had ever studied nature this closely. While other people were worshipping gods in the sky, Aristotle was worshipping reality, right here on Earth. He was building the first system of scientific knowledge the world had ever seen. Meanwhile, far away in Macedonia, a powerful king was thinking about Aristotle. His name was Philip II, and he had a son. A son who was wild and brilliant. Brilliant and full kind of fire. That boy's name was Alexander. Philip wanted his son to learn wisdom before he learned war. So he remembered Aristotle, the man whose father had once served as the royal doctor, and the man who was now the greatest living mind in Greece. He sent an invitation. "Come to Macedonia. Teach my son. I will give you everything you need." Aristotle said yes. Philip built a special school for Aristotle and Alexander in a quiet place called Myesa. It was surrounded by nature, trees, flowers, silence. It was not a palace. It was not a battlefield. It was a garden of thought. Here, Aristotle taught not only Alexander, but a group of young Macedonian nobles, the boys who would one day rule the empire with him. He taught them logic, philosophy, politics, ethics, literature, history, geography, medicine, rhetoric, strategy, but most of all, he taught them how to think. He gave Alexander a special copy of the Iliad, the great story of the Trojan War, and Aristotle had written his own notes in the margins. That book became Alexander's favorite. He carried it with him on all his military campaigns. Alexander was not an easy student. He was bold, ambitious, and restless. But he respected Aristotle. Aristotle taught him that a great king must not only conquer, he must understand. It was one of the most important mentorships in all of human history. As Aristotle taught in Myesa, something amazing was happening. His ideas were spreading. His notebooks were multiplying. His thoughts were evolving. He was no longer just a philosopher. He was becoming a force of nature, shaping the future with every word, every lesson, every scroll. And soon, the boy he taught would become a man, and that man would ride out to conquer the world. When Alexander finished his education, he began his conquest. And Aristotle, he returned to Athens. He was older now, wiser, more famous than ever before. He was no longer the rejected student. He was now the teacher of the world's most powerful man. This time, Athens welcomed him. He opened his own school. It was called the Lyceum. It was a place that was different from Plato's academy. Here, he walked with his students. He spoke while moving, walking through the gardens. He asked endless questions, and he taught everything, from logic to literature, from science to the soul, from nature to nations. His students were called peripatetics, which means those who walk around. In this school, Aristotle did not just teach. He created an intellectual movement. He began writing everything: politics, ethics, poetics, metaphysics, rhetoric, on the soul, history of animals, and hundreds more works. He was not just trying to be clever. He was trying to capture all human knowledge in one lifetime. He believed that everything is connected. If we can understand one thing deeply, we can understand everything. He created systems, definitions, categories. He said, logic is the tool for truth. Ethics is the path to happiness. Politics is the art of living together. Poetry is the mirror of emotion. Biology is the study of life itself. He believed in balance, in purpose, in observation, in discipline. He believed in asking, what is this thing? What is its purpose? What makes it excellent? That is how he studied everything, from frogs, to stars, to kings, to plays, to human pain. Where we stand now, Aristotle is in Athens. He has a school. He has students. He has ideas. And he has influence across the entire world, thanks to Alexander's growing empire. Part 2. Power, Politics, and the Price of Wisdom. The world was changing fast. Aristotle, now in his 40s and 50s, had become the most respected thinker on the planet. He was teaching at the Lyceum in Athens, writing furiously, and gathering students from all over the Greek world. His philosophy was no longer just theory. It was influencing real power. Because somewhere far from Athens, his former student, Alexander of Macedonia, was marching across the world like a storm. By now, Alexander had already defeated the great Persian Empire. He had taken Egypt. He had reached the heart of Asia. He had become the ruler of the largest empire in history. And everywhere Alexander went, Greek ideas followed. Especially Aristotle's ideas. Alexander sent plants, animals, maps, and cultural observations back to his old teacher in Athens. He opened libraries. He promoted education. He carried the Iliad, the one annotated by Aristotle, wherever he went. Aristotle was not riding horses into war. But make no mistake, his mind was riding beside Alexander, shaping the new empire from the shadows. And the people of Athens, they knew it. That is why, for a time, they tolerated Aristotle's presence, even though Aristotle was not Athenian by birth, and even though he had once been rejected by the academy. Now, he had power, not through soldiers, but through ideas. In the Lyceum, Aristotle was not just giving lectures. He was building a machine of knowledge. He created a structured system to study ethics, politics, biology, psychology, astronomy, economics, drama, logic, education, memory, emotion, dreams, the philosophy of war, the philosophy of friendship, the philosophy of everything. He did not treat subjects as separate. He believed everything was interconnected. He trained his students to observe the real world, to measure things, to analyze things, to question everything. They gathered the laws from hundreds of city-states to write the first political science encyclopedia. They collected data about animals, diseases, cities, rituals, theater plays. Everything was studied, labeled, and discussed. And while Plato's philosophy was poetic and mysterious, Aristotle's was sharp, logical, and built for the real world. His writing was not beautiful. In fact, it was often dry and technical. But it was clear, it was honest, and it was structured, like a blueprint of human knowledge. And that is what made it last for over 2,000 years. But not everyone was happy. Aristotle's power made him enemies. Many Athenians never forgot that he was not born in Athens. They never forgot that his student, Alexander, was a Macedonian conqueror. To them, Aristotle was not a Greek hero. He was a symbol of outside influence. They did not see a teacher. They saw a threat. And when Alexander began ruling more harshly, executing his opponents, and even declaring himself a god, Aristotle's name became dangerous to speak in public. People whispered, "Is Aristotle advising Alexander? Does he support this tyranny? Is he loyal to Athens or to the empire?" None of this was true. Aristotle did not want power. He wanted understanding. But public opinion is not logical. And slowly, the ground under Aristotle's feet began to crack. Then came the news that would change everything. In 323 BC, Alexander the Great died suddenly in Babylon. He was only 32 years old. The cause? Nobody knows for sure. Some say it was a fever. Some say poisoning. Some say fate. But one thing was certain. The empire he built in 12 years began to collapse overnight. Chaos erupted. In Athens, the people celebrated Alexander's death. To them, it was the fall of a tyrant and a chance to take back their freedom. But they did not just celebrate Alexander's death. They also went after his ideas, his allies, and his teacher. The same city that had killed Socrates for corrupting the youth now turned on Aristotle. They accused him of impiety, of disrespecting the gods, of spreading dangerous ideas. Was he guilty? No. But in ancient Athens, logic did not protect you. Powerful minds were often feared. Philosophers were seen as threats, and the mob, the angry crowd, did not care about truth. The same pattern was repeating again. Aristotle saw it very clearly. He once wrote, "When democracy is ignorant, even wisdom becomes a crime." So, instead of staying to defend himself, Aristotle quietly fled the city. He is said to have told his friends, "I will not allow Athens to sin twice against philosophy." The first sin was killing Socrates. The second would have been killing him. And so, he left. Aristotle returned to Chalcis, a city on the island of Euboea, where his mother had once lived. He was in his 60s now. He had no school, no students, no platform. Just his books, his notes, and his thoughts. His wife, Pythias, had died long ago. He now lived with Herpyllis, a woman he cared for deeply, and with their son, Nicomachus, named after his father. He continued writing. Even in exile, he could not stop thinking. His mind, even as his body weakened, kept working, like a living universe. He wrote about aging, about memory, about the soul, about how everything has a cause, a purpose, and a final form. He called it the unmoved mover, the thing behind all things, a force beyond time, beyond change, beyond us. It was his quiet version of God, not a man with a beard, but a perfect, pure mind, holding the order of the world together. He was now far from the city that once celebrated him, and then betrayed him. He lived in quiet exile in Chalcis, an island city. He had a heavy heart, but an unstoppable mind. His name was no longer shouted in the streets of Athens. No more eager students gathered in the shaded paths of the Lyceum. No messengers from royal palaces. No crowds. No noise. No applause. But inside his home, inside his private world, something was still burning. Because the world may forget you, but when you carry the universe inside your head, you still have something to give. Each morning, Aristotle woke up early. He did not have servants rushing around, or large halls filled with scrolls anymore. But on his small table, he kept stacks of parchment, pens made from reeds, and small jars of black ink. His hands trembled more than before. His body was slower. But his mind was still awake. He sat down. He dipped his pen. And he began to write again. One sentence, then another, and another. Day after day. Because he had one final mission now, to make sure that the truth outlives him. In these final years, Aristotle did not focus on fame or legacy. He focused on first principles, the deepest, most fundamental questions. What is existence? What causes something to exist? What is the purpose of everything that exists? Is there a meaning behind the universe? What is the soul? What is a human being? This is where he wrote his most difficult and abstract work, Metaphysics. In it, he explored ideas that no one had ever dared to put into logical form before. The nature of being, the structure of reality, the idea of an unmoved mover, something that causes all motion but is not moved by anything, a divine intelligence that is pure thought, not like a god in temples, but something deeper, invisible, eternal. He was not trying to please anyone. He was not trying to be popular. He was not trying to impress kings or scholars. He was simply trying to explain the invisible architecture of the universe, and he did it alone. During these years in exile, Aristotle was not completely alone. He lived with Herpyllis, the woman who had been with him since his time in Athens, and their young son, Nicomachus. This boy was the last person who carried not only Aristotle's blood, but also his potential, his possibility, his hope. Aristotle loved his son deeply. He spoke gently to him, told him stories, shared his thoughts. The way a philosopher speaks to a student, but with the warmth of a father speaking to his own child. And so, when he began writing a new work about morality and the purpose of life, he titled it Nicomachean Ethics, not because it was written for Nicomachus, not because it was about him, but because in that name, Aristotle placed his heart. A father, trying to leave behind not gold or buildings, but wisdom. In this book, he explained what it means to live a good life, why pleasure is not the highest goal, why virtue, being a good person, matters, why real happiness comes from balance and character and purpose. He wrote, "We are what we repeatedly do. Excellence, then, is not an act, but a habit." It became one of the most important books ever written about how to live, and it came from a man who was watching his own life slowly come to a close. The seasons passed. Winters became longer. Summers became shorter. Aristotle's legs grew weaker. His eyesight dimmed. He still tried to write, even when his fingers cramped. He still whispered questions to himself. He still argued with ideas inside his own mind. But the man who had once taught kings, who had classified the animals of the earth, who had mapped the stars with nothing but logic, who had built schools, shaped science, and named philosophy itself, now walked slowly through his garden. Or he sat silently, watching the wind move the trees. And sometimes you could see tears in his eyes. Not because he was afraid of death, but because he knew something very, very painful. Everything I have written could disappear. At that time, there were no printing presses, no digital libraries, no hard drives, no cloud storage. Every word he wrote was on fragile scrolls made of thin, dry material. They could be easily destroyed by fire or water or just time. He had written hundreds of works, some say over 200, but he knew, if just one generation fails to copy them, they could vanish from history. This fear haunted him. He did not want statues. He did not want temples in his name. He only wanted one thing: let the knowledge survive, even if I do not. When Aristotle knew the end was near, he wrote a will. It was not dramatic. It was not emotional. It was simple, logical, and thoughtful. He asked that Herpyllis be treated with honor and given a home. that Nicomachus be educated well and taken care of, that his servants be freed and given dignity, and that his body and be buried beside Pythias, his first wife. No monuments, no grand ceremony, just a clean ending to a life of deep thought. He lived for truth, not for attention, and that is how he wanted to leave. Aristotle died in 322, 2 BC, 1 year after Alexander. He was around 62 years old. But after he died, most of his works were lost. His students tried to preserve them, but the political chaos of the time scattered his scrolls. For almost 200 years, his teachings were hidden, stored away in dusty basements, forgotten by the world. It was not until centuries later, in the Roman era, and again in the Islamic Golden Age, that some of his works were rediscovered, translated, and brought back to life. If just a few accidents had happened differently, and we might have never heard the name Aristotle at all. Some works were passed from teacher to student, in secret. But for most of the world, they forgot him. Within just a few decades, his name disappeared from the public voice. People no longer quoted Aristotle. His teachings were no longer taught in schools. Other philosophers rose up, with different ideas, louder voices, more influence. Rome was rising. Greece was weakening. And slowly, across the ancient world, the scrolls of Aristotle vanished. The empire that once spread his ideas was gone. The kings he taught were dead. The school he built was silent. The fire was out. For nearly 200 years, the world acted as if Aristotle had never existed. In a small village, in the dusty cellar of a scholar's home, a collection of scrolls, dry and fragile, sat in silence. They were covered in dust. Their ink was fading. Their language was too difficult for most people to understand. But they were there. And one day, in the city of Skepsis in Asia Minor, a man named Apellicon, a rich book collector and lover of philosophy, heard rumors of these scrolls. He traveled to the village. He paid large sums of money. And finally, he saw them with his own eyes. The lost works of Aristotle, hundreds of scrolls, damaged, dirty, scattered, but still intact. He did not understand everything he read, but he knew these were not ordinary writings. He packed them carefully, and he took them back to Athens. And once again, after nearly 200 years, Aristotle returned to his city. As the Roman Empire grew, it absorbed the culture of Greece. Roman leaders, soldiers, and scholars all respected Greek philosophy, but most of them followed Stoicism or Epicureanism, not Aristotle, until one Roman general, Sulla, raided Athens and captured Apellicon's library. He took the scrolls of Aristotle back to Rome. There, a young and brilliant scholar named Andronicus of Rhodes discovered them. He did not just read the scrolls, he organized them, he edited them, he sorted them into categories: logic, ethics, apud, altsel, and apolitics, science, metaphysics. He turned the mess into a system. He created what we now call the organon, Aristotle's system of logic; the Nicomachean ethics, his ideas on how to live; the politics, how humans should live together; the poetics, how art and drama should reflect human truth; metaphysics, the study of being, reality, and cause; de anima, the study of the soul; the history of animals, the birth of biology. These were not just books. These were the intellectual skeleton of human civilization, and they were almost lost forever, hundreds of years later, in the heart of the Islamic world, something incredible happened. In cities like Baghdad, Cordoba, and Cairo, scholars began collecting and translating the ancient texts of Greece. They did not just translate them, they studied them deeply. They debated them, and they built new systems on top of them. Aristotle became the most respected name in Islamic philosophy. Thinkers like Avicenna, Ibn Sina, Averroes, Ibn Rushd, and Al-Farabi, they all studied Aristotle. They called him the first teacher. His writings on logic, ethics, medicine, and astronomy were used in universities all across the Islamic world. And it was through their translations that Aristotle eventually reached medieval Europe. By the 12th and 13th centuries, Europe was emerging from the Dark Ages. Christian scholars, especially in universities like Paris, began to rediscover Aristotle through Arabic translations, which were later retranslated into Latin. At first, the Church was suspicious. Aristotle was not Christian. He did not speak of the Bible or God. But one brilliant theologian, Thomas Aquinas, saw something deeper. He believed Aristotle's logic and philosophy could help explain Christian theology in a rational, logical way. He combined faith and reason, and in doing so, he made Aristotle the foundation of all European thought. His journey, from being lost in a cellar to becoming the foundation of a continent's way of thinking. It's just incredible, isn't it? We tell stories just like this every week. Stories that show how ideas, how people, can struggle and wait and finally change the world. If you love learning English this way, through these powerful, real-life journeys, please take a moment to subscribe to English TV. That way, you'll always be here with us for the next great story. For the next 600 years, students in Europe studied Aristotle's logic to learn how to argue, his ethics to learn how to live, his politics to understand society, his biology to explore nature, his metaphysics to seek God. When modern universities were created in Europe, in cities like Bologna, Paris, Oxford, and Cambridge, their curriculum, their lessons, were built around Aristotle's works. Even scientists like Galileo, Kepler, and Newton, who disagreed with parts of Aristotle's science, still used his method, the method of observation, logic, and reason. Even modern logic, computer science, and artificial intelligence have their roots in Aristotle's original system of classification and reasoning. His influence became so large, so deep, so foundational, that people stopped even noticing it. He became the heir of Western thinking, invisible, but always present. Think about this. Aristotle lived before Jesus Christ, before the Roman Empire, before the invention of paper, before the birth of Islam, before the discovery of electricity, the invention of the telescope, the building of modern cities, the rise of youthful democracy, the fall of monarchies, before the internet, before artificial intelligence, before you, and before me. And yet, 200 to 300 years later, we are still asking his questions, reading his ideas, studying his logic, debating his ethics, building systems on his foundation. Aristotle never raised an army. He never ruled a nation. He did not own land. He did not command wealth. He died in exile, mostly forgotten. He was nearly erased from history. And yet, he won. Not with power, not with violence, not with status, but with thought. He did not conquer cities. He conquered ignorance. He did not build empires of land. He built an empire of reason. And today, whether we realize it or not, we all live in a world that Aristotle helped to build. Part 4. the philosopher who became time. His final gift to the world. His name lives. His words live. His mind lives. His questions live. And through them, we live better. But how? How did a man who was nearly erased from history become the intellectual father of nearly everything we call modern? Let's answer this one last time by stepping deep into what Aristotle left behind. Aristotle did not just teach students, he taught generations. His questions were so deep, so eternal, that every new generation found themselves staring at the same mysteries. What is a good life? What is truth? What is happiness? What is the soul? What is justice? How should society work? Why are we here? And the reason we still read him today is simple. He never told people what to think. He taught them how to think. He did not give you the answer. He gave you the tools to find it for yourself. And that is why his teachings feel fresh, even today. Not like old knowledge, but like a mirror to modern life. Let's now understand his most important teachings. I will explain them in the easiest possible way, so everyone, even beginners, can understand and feel what he meant. What is the meaning of life? Aristotle said everything has a purpose. The purpose of a knife is to cut. The purpose of a seed is to grow into a tree. And the purpose of a human life is to become the best version of yourself. He believed the goal of life is not just to be rich or famous or powerful, but to live in a way that matches your potential. In Greek, he called it eudaimonia. It's a word that is bigger than happiness. It means a life that is full, meaningful, balanced, excellent, and honest. What is real happiness? He said, real happiness does not come from pleasure or from money. It comes from virtue, from being brave and kind and wise and disciplined and fair. He taught that we must practice good actions like we practice a sport. You become good by doing good, not by dreaming about it. Just like your muscles grow with repetition, your character grows with repetition. What makes someone great? Aristotle did not believe greatness comes from birth or background. He said, "You are what you repeatedly do." That means, if you lie every day, you become a liar. If you speak the truth every day, you become an honest person. If you study every day, you become wise. If you ignore your talents every day, you lose them. Greatness is not luck. It is a habit. What is the best way to live? He believed in the golden mean, the middle path, between extremes, not too much, not too little, not cowardly, and not reckless, but courageous, not lazy, and not obsessed, but disciplined, not silent, and not rude, but honest. He believed that a good life is lived with balance, and that is what brings peace. What is the soul? He said the soul is not a ghost inside you. It is your form, your shape, your actions, your choices. It is what makes you, you. For Aristotle, the soul was not a floating spirit. It was your living potential. It was not what you feel. It was what you do with your life. If you live with virtue, your soul is strong. If you live with lies, your soul weakens. What is the role of government? He believed that society should help people become their best selves. He did not believe in total freedom. He did not believe in total control. He believed in justice, where citizens and leaders both follow reason. For him, politics was not about power. It was about education, fairness, duty, and growth. What makes us human? Logic, language, memory, purpose. He said humans are not just animals. We are the only ones who ask, what is right? What is wrong? What is my role in this world? That is what made Aristotle special. He never stopped asking those questions, and he never stopped helping others ask them too. Why should his story be told today? Loudly, proudly, endlessly. Because we live in a world that is filled with noise, a world addicted to attention, obsessed with opinions, a world that is always in a hurry, a world that forgets the past and glorifies fame over wisdom. And in that world, Aristotle is a lighthouse. He reminds us that quiet thinking is powerful, that truth needs patience, that growth takes time, that knowledge matters, that discipline is freedom, that greatness is not in your birth, but in your action. He reminds us that even if the world forgets you, if your work is honest, and your words are clear, and your intent is pure, you will live forever. In the minds of those who are still learning to think. This video, this story, this language is not just about a philosopher. It's about you. Because every sentence here helps you listen to real, beautiful English. Understand powerful ideas in simple words. Practice how to think and speak better. Build your fluency with real storytelling. Feel motivation while learning new vocabulary. And discover the power of speaking slowly, clearly, and deeply. Aristotle did not speak English, but the best way to learn English is by listening to real stories about real people with real meaning. And if you understood this story today, congratulations. I am proud of you. You are already growing. 2,300 years ago, a boy sat under the stars and wondered, why does the world exist? What is my purpose? How can I live well? And how can I help others do the same? His name was Aristotle. He never knew the internet. He never imagined airplanes. He never saw skyscrapers, or microphones, or satellites, or smartphones. He lived in a world of scrolls, sandals, sun, war, silence, and exile. And yet, he shaped our entire way of thinking. His body turned to dust. But his mind became time-proof. This is not just the end of a story. It's the beginning of a mindset. A mindset that says, ask more questions, think deeper, practice virtue, become better each day, learn something new every moment, live with reason, with love, with balance, and with purpose. That is what Aristotle would want you to do. That is the real legacy of a man who was once nearly forgotten, but now teaches the whole world again, including you. And that is where our story concludes. This one was a real journey, wasn't it? I am so curious to hear from you. What were your final thoughts? What part of his long life, his struggles, or his ideas stayed with you? Do you have any lingering questions about why he did something, or what one of his ideas means for us today? Please leave all of your opinions, your theories, and your questions below. I truly love reading every single one and building this wonderful community with all of you. Thank you so much for listening, for learning, and for being here. I will see you in the next video. Until then, keep learning, keep growing, and never, ever stop thinking.